Okay, hi and welcome to the second video in this series. In this lesson, or in this part of the lesson, I'll be talking about shadowing, general shadowing. But before I progress with that, then first of all, let me address a question that I mentioned in the previous video. What happens when words fail? If you watch the video, I'm sure you'll understand war is what happens when words fail. However, as an interpreter, I think it's important to understand that conflict is what happens. Conflict can be intrapersonal inside of you. Conflict can be interpersonal with another person, intergroup, or between countries. What I mean by this is, as an interpreter, it's important for us to understand the objectives, what it is a person wants to communicate, not the words that they use to communicate that message through with. So this belongs to the field of pragmatics. On courses I teach on translation and translating manga, translating, making subtitles. Then I focus on pragmatics there. Maybe I'll add another course at a later date. But basically pragmatics, we focus on what the speaker wants the listener to do, what the speaker wants a listener to believe, to think, what the speaker wants a listener to know. Those three basic elements are what we focus on from pragmatics, and in our translations we have to ensure that that message is conveyed to the listener. When that message isn't correctly conveyed, this is when the speaker feels intrapersonal conflict. They feel stressed, they feel annoyed, frustrated. A perfect example of this is, if you have children, you'll understand this. They cannot, little children, toddlers, they cannot communicate the message that they really want to communicate. And they'll try all sorts of techniques, they'll wave their hands, they'll point at things. And when all that fails, you find they just start screaming. So this is intrapersonal conflict. And if you're a parent, you'll know when a little child is screaming at you, you feel stressed. And so the communication, the breakdown of communication happens in both directions. Okay, so let's progress. Actually, one good thing about being an interpreter, and one important thing about being an interpreter, is when we make errors, don't try to cover them up. Everybody makes errors. It's human nature to make errors. At the first opportunity, bring them up and mention them. So this could be at the end of speaking, or it could be in a second video like I'm doing now. So I realized partway through the previous video that I wanted to say jog one's memory, and I was saying jot one's memory. And partway through I corrected myself. If I'm working with a client, then I would say, please accept my apologies. I was using the word jot instead of jog. And I also use the word jot to mean to take down messages. So at the first opportunity, you will say to the listener, even if you are in the middle of an interpretation, you'll bring it up and mention the error that you made to ensure that the confusion doesn't continue. If your pride is too high to actually admit to making an error, then turn this video off now. You're never going to be able to push yourself to the level where you need to be someone successful in this field. We have to be very honest. We have to be able to admit our errors. And anyone who doesn't admit their errors is, quite frankly, a liar. Okay, now I need to put my glasses on. As you can see on the screen, if you look right up here, then this is the basic outline of each lesson. In this first lesson, I go through explaining each point. From the second lesson onwards, then I don't explain each point. I just, you'll probably have one video with me. And once you get an understanding about how to do each activity, you just need to focus on the materials I put up there. Okay, now I need to zoom in because I have bad eyesight. Okay. So I'll explain about general shadowing in a moment. But basically, if I just explain, each lesson is split into two parts. So our lessons in Japan are approximately 90 minutes long. And the first 20 minutes are warm-up, so general shadowing, and an interpreter memory game. And then the following 70 minutes, I focus on these 6. Hold on, I've got 2 number 2s there. Okay, like I said, we need to admit to our mistakes. It should say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but I've written 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, first of all, I'll present you with core vocabulary. It may take you 10 minutes to review that vocabulary, or it could take you a couple of hours to learn that vocabulary if you're not familiar with it. Then there's a quick activity for quick response, where you'll hear the English, you shout out the Japanese, you hear the Japanese, you shout out the English. Then an activity reading aloud at native speed. For native, here I'm referring to a Japanese speaker. Then focus shadowing. This is shadowing someone talking about the actual topic of the lesson, which in this first lesson is the history of interpreting in Japan. Consecutive interpreting memory, consecutive interpreting notes, and simultaneous interpreting. Those 3 activities will be using short presentations made by my students, actually, short presentations, Japanese presentations, and you'll practice interpreting using those. Okay, let me proceed now. So, general shadowing, and I've made a few notes about why I think it's important to do general shadowing. But first of all, before I do that, let me just give you an example of what is general shadowing. Now, if you have a look at 1.3 here, then you'll see I've got 3 links. This is to a news link, and this one is to Sazai-san. If you've lived in Japan, if you know Japan, you will have heard of Sazai-san. And this one is Crayon Shinchan. Okay, now I'll give you a quick example using Sazai-san of what general shadowing is. First of all, let's just listen to a little snippet from this.
あら、手袋編んでらっしゃるの？ええ。指の作り方教えてくれません？いいですわよ。ほら、こうやって。あ、私にも教えて。私も拝見。もう一遍やってみてくださらない？はいはい。なるほど。早速帰って編んでみますわ。指が7本もできちゃった。姉さんは編み物名人。
Okay, so let's imagine I'm going to use Sazai-san to practice shadowing. I'll put my headphones in now, so only I can hear this. And I'll play the recording. So I'm listening to this as we go along, and all I will do let's say about 1 to 2 seconds behind, I will just be saying what I hear. I have no script. I'm just focusing on the video in front of me and repeating what I hear. あら、手袋編んでいらっしゃるの？指の作り方を教えてくれません？いいですわよ。ほら、こうやって、私にも教えて。私も拝見、もう一遍やってみてくださらない？はい。なるほど。早速書いて編んでみますわ。指が7本できちゃった。姉さんは編み物名人。Okay, so that's basically it. You say what you hear. Let me first of all explain now general shadowing. Why would you do general shadowing? I've taken some notes. And the first thing that I think is very important is it's important to understand that your face muscles. My face muscles, I grew up in the UK. My face muscles are designed to speak English. For me, English is the easiest. And so when I speak Japanese, I use a different group of face muscles. I tend to speak lower down here. I move my mouth less when I speak Japanese. So the first thing is, by shadowing, we're warming up our face muscles. I usually, on my way to university, it takes me about 30 minutes to get to university in the morning. On my way to university, I usually put on NHK TV, the main broadcast channel. And when I'm just listening to the news, I will just shadow as I'm driving to university. Perhaps 10 minutes I would shadow, and then the next 10 minutes I'll do simultaneous interpreting. By the time I get to university, my Japanese face muscles are moving at the same speed as a Japanese person's face muscles are moving when they are speaking Japanese. Second reason for doing this. So first one, exercise the face muscles. I also put here, wake up your Japanese brain. This is something that I find very important. Following that, I wrote, it's very useful to reinforce the vocabulary that you already know. Sazai-san, Kureyon Shin-chan, it's just everyday Japanese. There's nothing special, there's nothing difficult about the Japanese here. It's something that you'll hear on the streets, you'll hear if you go to anyone's house. It's just regular, normal Japanese. And the third thing is to enable, probably this is number 4 actually, it's enable you to identify any vocabulary that you don't know. So this is just everyday conversational Japanese, and as they're going along, from time to time you'll encounter a very simple vocabulary that you maybe didn't know. It's something that is commonly used by children or by adults in their everyday conversation, but as foreign language learners, it's maybe not in a textbook. Okay, so it's a good way of finding out vocabulary you don't actually know. And another one, this is perhaps most important, that it's not natural to actually listen and speak at the same time. So this is the main thing that shadowing is training you to do. It's training your brain to manage two things at the same time. You're listening and you're speaking at the same time. And this is fundamental for interpreting. You need to be able to both listen and speak at the same time. And so you're creating like a little pocket in your brain where the sound is coming in, and you're saving that information, and you're putting it out, and at the same time as you're putting information out, you're listening and new information is coming in. Now when you get more accustomed to doing this, then what I recommend you do is you take out a notepad, and while you're shadowing, just scribble down anything in your notepad, draw pictures on your notepad. It creates an extra space in your brain, and your focus goes on what you're doing here, and slowly, little bit by little bit, you'll find that the listening and speaking becomes automatic. You should realize that when we're actually speaking in our first language, we don't seem to be thinking that much, or we don't feel like we're thinking that much. That's because it's a very subconscious activity. However, when we speak in a foreign language, it's very common for us to actually think, construct sentences in our mind. Interpreters, we have to avoid doing that as much as possible. We have to rely on our subconscious brain to actually do that automatically for us. And our conscious brain, we're maybe focusing on notes. If we forget something, if, like yesterday, I made a mistake in the video, I'll make a note of that. And these are the things that I'm focusing on, and I just rely on the subconscious listening and speaking to work for me. Okay, so that's all I'll say for now. So as you can see, for general interpreting, general shadowing, I've written 10. I usually get my students to practice this for 10 minutes at the beginning of the lesson. While they are practicing shadowing in English, I'll practice shadowing in Japanese, so that we're all just ready to work at full speed throughout the rest of the lesson. Okay, last point to make. If you find this difficult, do not worry. it took me months and months to actually develop the shadowing, the ability to do shadowing. And I started by shadowing, I tried to start by shadowing Japanese, but I found it difficult. So I started by shadowing BBC. And it developed my ability to listen and speak at the same time. It developed my ability to shadow. And after doing that for a few months, I then started moving on to Japanese. And I found it relatively easy. So for me, the biggest challenge at first was to develop the ability to both listen and speak at the same time. Now, you will probably encounter a number of difficulties when you're doing this. You noticed I have a lot of different types of headphones, but when I'm simultaneously interpreting, I prefer to use these cheap ones. I just bought them at the convenience store, like 1,000 yen, something like that. And why do I do this? The first thing you'll realize is when you put your headphones on, if your headphones are very good, you won't be able to hear your voice. And it's very distracting if your voice sounds muffled to you. This is problem number one. So if your headphones are too good, you'll feel like if you put your fingers in your ears and talk, it's very weird. It's very difficult to be sure that you're actually speaking coherently. Okay, the second problem you may find is if, for example, sometimes I'll just put one headphone in, and when I'm speaking, I'm focusing on one ear, but my voice becomes too loud, and so because my voice is too loud, my own voice is blocking what I actually hear here. Here. Two different spellings, here and here. What I can actually hear. So, this is your first challenge to overcome. Find a set of headphones, earphones, that suit you. Everyone will be different. Become accustomed to either not being able to hear your voice clearly or being able to block out your voice because your voice is overlapping with what you're listening to. Okay, it's very important for you to master this before you move on to simultaneous interpreting. Okay, I shall stop talking now. When you're ready, pick any of these three, whichever you feel most comfortable doing. Don't worry if you can't say everything, just say what you can and just keep going for 10 minutes. You'll find you'll get better and better as the time goes on. Please, I keep giving a little bit extra information. Please try to do this every day. This is actually fundamental to interpreting, and every morning when you wake up, just make a habit of it. Or when you're in the car or doing anything, just make a habit of shadowing, albeit in your first language, albeit in the foreign language. Just try and develop a habit of this. It becomes easier and easier if you do that. Okay. Good luck, guys, and I'll see you in the next video where I explain what the interpreter memory game is.